Howdy folks, Justin here. Today we are going to look at 5 cards that I think are criminally underplayed right now and constructed. Um, and the cards that I think we could all put in some decks and get some benefit out of, or cards that require decks that we don't see on the ladder yet. The first one I want to take a look at is Dune Smuggler. This is a 3-drop creature. 3/1 green creature. Summon, move another friendly creature. Whenever a friendly creature moves, give it +1/+1. I've been seeing more and more of the lane moving cards lately, which is great because I feel like these are some really powerful cards. But I think Dune Smuggler is particularly useful. 3 power, 3-drop is already good, and the ability to give another creature +1/+1 also good. And the effect, it stacks with itself, so you get another Dune Smuggler, you move it, creature, you're giving it +2/+2. And there are a lot of situations where, both in aggressive decks where you want to avoid a guard, or in controlling or mid-range decks where you want to trade into an opposing creature in the other lane, where a Dune Smuggler is going to give you a ton of flexibility. It's almost as good as playing, 2 cards in one, right? Because the +1/+1 can give you the value to survive the attack, the trade, and the Dune Smuggler itself can then trade into something if you need to do that. It synergizes particularly well with guards. Imagine a turn where you have a Black Sap Protector against an opposing creature. You swing into the 2 power creature, you kill it, Black Sap Protector is now a 3/1, and you Dune Smuggler it into the other lane because your opponent's playing smart and diversifying the location of their threats because they know you're playing these kind of clunky guard creatures, these bigger guard creatures. You've suddenly, generated a tremendous amount of value and left a Dune Smuggler on the board. I love this card in Arena, but I think it's got a lot of pretty serious constructed applications as well. It's fantastic in Pilfer decks, which we don't really see at all. The ability to move your Pilfer creatures, your fragile Pilfer creatures out of the way to get another swing in and another trigger of Pilfer, super useful. And yeah, and also, it's worth pointing out, the 1 toughness is deceptive. It's not as bad as it looks. By the time you're playing Dune Smuggler, your opponent probably has already used a removal spell of some kind that would effectively deal with the 1 toughness of this guy on something else if you're playing the aggressive deck. And if you're playing the more controlling deck, you don't really need to worry about it. You're more interested in slamming your Smuggler into something, and that's when the power matters and not the toughness. Obviously it trades poorly against cards like Varanus Courier. But those are sort of niche situations, and 3 power right now is more important than ever. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love Crushing Blow, which does not appear on the list, by the way, because I think I've been hyping up Crushing Blow since the end of May when I started playing Legends. But 3 toughness deals with so many creatures. I mean, just on this page alone, right? You have Moonlight Werebat, which is all over the place lately. You have Murkwater Shaman, which sees some play in some of the more esoteric archer decks, as well as some of the scout variants. And it also, it can trade with things like 5th Legion Trainer, which is when you always want to swing into Kvatch Soldier. 3 is a really important number to be able to deal, a really important amount of damage to be able to deal. And this guy does it well, in addition to providing a lot of value and a lot of flexibility. My next card on my list is Dawnstar Healer. This is a card I first saw in closed beta when I played against Maricon, the developer. He has done a lot of experimenting, a lot of building with spell sword control decks that are just the grindiest things. I mean, use decks that use Orb of Vermina to generate more cards. And part of what would make that deck work was Dawnstar Healer. You set up a board with some guards and you just never swing, and then turn 8, 9, 10, you drop a Dawnstar Healer or 2 and you swing, and you're suddenly out of the range of being killed. In addition to that, it's a 3/3 for 3 solid rate. Not quite an Imperial Legionnaire, but Imperial Legionnaire doesn't see a lot of play. Its ability to claw you back into a game that looks difficult in a color like yellow, which isn't lacking for life gain options, isn't that impressive until you consider the fact that in multiples this card is insane. you could have not swung the entire game, be at 5 life, and your opponent's thinking, oh, I just need to do this, that, or the other, draw a prophecy card. But Dawnstar Healer can get you back into any game. I would recommend this. I think it slots in nicely into the Crusader mid-range and control decks that I've seen lately. I think it slots into more mid-range, less control, but more mid-range Spellsword decks. And I've also seen it successfully played in Maracon's Spellsword control deck. I really like this card. I definitely recommend giving it a shot. I think it's great in Arena too. It's worth pointing that out. It, you know, you can play it for tempo on turn 3 as a 3/3 and trade favorably with your opponent's creatures. And it's also got a place in more aggressive decks that are looking to manipulate their life total into a position where they can get value from Golden Saint and whatever other color they're running. That card as well. Each color has the card that is a lot more valuable when you have more life. This guy can slot in nicely into those decks and make sure that that happens. So I highly recommend checking out Dawnstar Healer. My third card is probably the most obscure card on this list. It is Stronghold Eradicator. This is a 6/6 for 5. Already above the curve as far as stats go. And its ability is interesting. It says, summon, give all enemy creatures in this lane guard. And you may be thinking to yourself, at first glance, like, why would I want to do that? Well, you're not playing this in the Battle Facts of Life aggro deck that I've been playing. You're playing this in a deck where you don't necessarily have access to targeted removal, or at least not a lot of it. Not enough, not as much as you want. And your opponent is possibly putting creatures in the shadow lane. This gives you the ability to just slam your guys into creatures. Imagine the satisfaction you're going to get when you throw your creature into a lethal, potentially lethal card on the shadow lane that's behind a guard or that's just got cover because it just got summoned. This guy does it all in addition to being a 5-mana 6/6, 5 Magicka 6/6. I think a lot of people overlook the neutral cards, in particular the Dwemer cards, because they are largely just sort of filler stuff for Arena, it feels like. Dwarven Centurion is another example of a card that just doesn't see play despite the fact it's not terrible. Dwarven Ballista is an example of that filler type stuff. But Stronghold Eradicator is high value and an ability that once you get familiar with playing with can really, really give you some pretty unique advantages in this game. Granting opposing creatures guard is a lot more useful than I ever would have imagined. I got a couple of these guys in Arena recently, and I was reminded of how much I enjoyed playing with this card. And in closed beta, I actually ran 3 of these in one of my initial iterations of the Scout deck when Battle Mage was all over the place. Battle Mage and Orcs were the meta for a while in closed beta, and the Stronghold Eradicator did a real good job of providing a sort of ability to remove those threats that otherwise wasn't available. And there are definitely some decks now, I'm thinking of the Assassin deck in particular that's popular, where your opponent's going to be hiding high-value creatures, aggressive creatures, behind guard creatures. This allows you to, that guard creature's still there, but this allows you to trade into that creature without worrying about removing the guard first, which can be especially troubling if it's a card like Fighter's Guild Recruit, which has lethal. My fourth card is a pet card of mine with a funny story attached to it, Moment of Clarity. So the first deck that I made that took off the ground at all was a Action Mage deck back in June, and got to Legend 1 with it not long after crafting it. In fact, after I finished the story mode, my first time through the story mode, I soul-trapped all my cards, and I built this deck because I'd been theory crafting it while I played through story mode and learned the mechanics of the game. And it was this blue-yellow action deck that was really cheap to craft, which is part of the reason it appealed to me. And back then, there were only a few net decks, if you will, people who would post on the beta forums the lists they'd been having success with were then immediately all over the place. So I threw a Moment of Clarity, a copy of Moment of Clarity in the deck, so that I knew, just sort of as a personal satisfaction type thing, that when I played against a a mage deck on the ladder and they cast Moment of Clarity, I knew to myself with some significant degree of certainty what I could expect from the rest of the deck, right? Because uh, seeing the one of Moment of Clarity suggested to me that they had just copied my list, which is fine. I mean, I didn't have, it wasn't like I was felt like violated because I'd taken this idea of mine. But it was a tell, right? It let me know exactly what to expect from the rest of the deck, more than likely. But beyond that, funny aside, or maybe not so funny, I guess, depending on your point of view. I think it's funny. Moment of Clarity is a great card. Those of you who play Hearthstone are probably familiar with the Discover mechanic, where 3 cards are revealed on screen. You get to choose one of them to put it into your hand. And you recognize the power of that sort of flexibility, right? And there's a couple aspects to that. The first aspect of that is that Moment of Clarity can pull cards that are not in your deck, aren't even in your colors, which can give you some really wacky interactions. It rewards people who can think on their feet quickly. But the other thing that I love about Moment of Clarity is that there are going to be decks, I'm thinking more controlling decks, but mid-range strategies can value from this too. Tempo strategies that are, that haven't sealed up the game and they're running out of gas. Where Moment of Clarity provides such a diverse array of options that you can generally pick your, decide how you're going to proceed from there in a number of different ways, any number of which could lead to a victory. If you Moment of Clarity turn 5, and you already have a 3-drop in hand, or even if you don't, the access to that extra magicka allows you to make a whole bunch of different plays, right? You could choose a card you can play that turn. If it's an unopposed board, you just choose a 3, 2, or 1-drop creature, and you can be happy with that. If it's a board sweeper because you need one of those, you can get that a shackle card that could swing the tempo back in your favor. Moment of Clarity just provides a whole bunch of flexibility that isn't really available in this game most of the time. Most of the effects of that give you a variety of cards when you play them are like High Rock Summoner, where it's a random one, and sometimes you really need that guard, sometimes you really need that ward creature for whatever reason. Moment of Clarity gives you a little more clarity, if you will, on that choice, because you actually get to see the options. Now, there are going to be times when your options are Mud Crab, Crocodile, and Veteran Enforcer, and I'm sorry that happened to you. That is, of course, the risk of playing with cards like this, but unlike a lot of other card games, most of the cards in Legends are, if not competitive, at least good enough, well statted enough to be playable in the right situation. So it's rare. I mean, in my experience, really rare that you have a Moment of Clarity where there's just nothing in that hand, in that pull that you want to play at some point. I would recommend, just toss one of them into a deck that plays blue, give it a shot, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Also, again, to mention Arena, I think Moment of Clarity is pretty good in Arena. It's one of the best top decks I think you can have, to be honest with you. So that brings us to my final card that I think is criminally underplayed and constructed right now. And that card is Gloomwraith. Purple is home to some undercosted minions that provide a lot more stats than you would think. Example, North Point Captain. Young Mammoth is, of course, the poster child for this. Haunting Spirit, even Stalwart Ally. All of these cards, by the way, would fit into this deck, which I'm about to imagine with you. I ran Gloomwraith in the original versions of my Scout deck. I did not. In the original version of the Scout deck, there was no Murkwater Witch and there's no Leaf Lurker. There was instead Gloomwraith and see if I can find it for you. Dragontail Savior. Now, Dragontail Savior is actually in my current version of the Scout deck, which I hope to be able to share with you pretty soon. It has returned. But I feel that Gloomwraith needs to be seriously considered as a serious contender in this game. So you can't make the super aggressive deck in purple, in a majority purple deck that you can in, say, majority red, majority yellow, or even majority purple or green. I'm sorry, blue or green. But Gloomwraith can come down turn 4 as a 5/5 pretty easily, and a 5/5 for breakthrough for 4 sort of fits this like curve of just undercosted minions that you can chain together in a majority or even mono purple deck. I've been working on this idea for a while. I guess it's not on my list anymore. I had a list called Purple Storm that was almost all purple cards. But imagine for, a deck running Gloomwraith, Black Marsh Warden, Midnight Sweep, Stalwart Ally, Haunting Spirit, the Mammoth, Spell Sword, Hiss Speaker, Dragontail Savior, and you can see like, a pretty robust deck just full of powerful creatures. A sort of slower zoo-style list. Gloomwraith fits right into that. Even a 4/4 for 4 with Breakthrough is a fine rate. Obviously, a terrible top deck after a board sweeper, but you just need to consider that when you're putting the deck together. I think Gloomwraith is really underplayed. I love it in Arena too. It's an undead for what that's worth. I'm not sure how the change to Bone Colossus is. There's been discussion from the developers that this is going to say other friendly skeletons only get +1/+1 or something like that. But I think that Gloomwraith is. I mean, first of all, I never see it played. I think there's a place for it, and I think actually, if you guys are interested, I'll put together this Purple Storm deck as I call it, and show you some games with it because it's not that hard to curve out with just solid purple creatures, and this guy can be enormous. Turn 7 with a magic elixir potion, dropping 2 of them onto a board with just a single creature on it is a good rate. It's just it falls into, like I said, this line of cards in purple that are just more value than you expect to get for that magic cost, and it sort of tops them off, right? And it's also worth the reason it's on my list is because it's the one I never see played. So, those are 5 cards I think are just not played on ladder nearly as much as they should be if they're played at all. I recommend you check them all out. Definitely draft them in Arena, next time you get a chance, just so you can see them in action and get a feel for them. And then, try experiment with them, throw them into your decks. I think that any of these, except for the Gloomwraith, really can slot nicely into existing constructed decks. And I think Gloomwraith has a whole deck that, even though it's not a reason to build a deck, it fits into a deck that nobody's playing that is really, I think, pretty solid. I hope you got something out of this video. I hope that you want to see some of these cards in action. Let me know if there's anything you definitely want to see, or other cards maybe that you think I'm missing that I should investigate, because I'm always looking for the next Moonlight Werebat myself. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.